Well, good afternoon, everybody. Really good to have so many familiar faces here and some new ones too. For those of you that don't know, the Fireside Chats are our opportunity to bring the community together to actually have some really good, interesting conversations where everybody's opinion is respected. Every experience you might want to share, which again cements the point, or even disagrees, it's fine. It's about the conversation and the discussion that follows, and where we can all take our value from it. And so every week we have a new topic, and it's essentially a 10-minute introduction, like a TED talk, to the topic, and then the floor is open for everybody else to discuss. So today we're going to be talking about developing a support network for growth, and I have to confess, as somebody who's ran a national network in the UK for well over a decade, I've had many experiences, which I'm going to share a few of them with you today. But I've also had the advantage of being the hub that people came to me. For the vast majority of you, where you start businesses, you're not necessarily the hub. And when we make that first step out to build our networks, we're not necessarily doing it consciously, looking for all of the different areas we might want some support. So if you read the post I put on LinkedIn this week, you'll know that there's a framework there for the different areas of support which we encourage people to build into their network. And I want to go through these in a couple of details, but share with you a couple of brief stories as well, so you can get the context for them too. So this is our building a growth network model. And as a business community, Hivemind is a community of talented entrepreneurs running their own businesses, many thought leaders, a whole variety of different skill sets and experiences, typically worldly people who've got stories to tell and experiences to share, and bringing them together on a regular basis so they really get a deep relationship with each other is essentially our criteria for it. So let us start. Let's start with informational. So informational support. These are the experts in our network, or maybe the people who've been around the block a few times. So the mentors, the people with experience, who are quite happy to just take you under the wing or give you the advice when you need it. They can also be the people who encourage you to put the emphasis on your own personal growth, your own business development. And so it's knowledge and skills, informational support. And you probably, as I'm talking about some of these things, you're probably relating this to some of the people in your network who are always happy to give advice, always happy to lend a resource, share a link, share good content they found elsewhere. We have a number of people, even for the Fireside Chats, who regularly share it with their networks because they believe the quality of the content is good enough to share. And what I want to do is share with you just a quick story. So no matter how much you think you know on any one subject, there are people who encourage you to learn and develop more. So the chap on the screen at the moment is a chap called Tony Nutley, who some of you I know. Tony runs something called the UK College of Personal Development. So back in 2016, when I wrote my book Influence, which was very much a book around building a personal brand and doing the marketing that's associated with a personal brand, I got a call from Tony, who typically works with coaches, and he said, "So what's next, Warren?" At the time, actually, he phoned because he wanted to buy 10 copies of the book for their library, but his question was, "What's next?" And in that conversation, I was encouraged to go and start taking the psychology aspect of influence in much more detail, and certainly sparked my curiosity. But that put me on a whole new journey and really enhanced everything that I was doing from stage, from keynote speeches, etc. So there's just the people who step forward. You may not have even asked for the advice, but they recognize where you're at, and they just have maybe one or two ideas to share with you that give you that next step. That's the informational support. Then coming on to emotional support. I'm not going to share a face with this from a confidential point of view, but certainly in my own business, I know a number of conversations I've had with a number of you. Sometimes as small business owners, we go through hard times. And many years ago, experiencing a company being forced into liquidation was actually really quite grueling. And sometimes the support comes from the people that you don't expect it to. So in this particular case, I was putting the business into liquidation. On the day of the hearing, to my surprise, one of my creditors turned up, and she hadn't turned up to be angry. She turned up to take me to lunch afterwards and just show me emotional support. on the day, and obviously hugely grateful, and of course creditors got their money back. But the point is, she turned up not to be defensive or even aggressive. She turned up just to say, I sense you might need a cup of tea and a bite to eat today. So that's what we did afterwards. The emotional support in your network comes from lots of different places. Let's face it, we're emotional creatures. So we often need to know people care or empathize with the way that we feel. We need to feel that we're understood. So just having those people who are a little bit more empathetic and can see perhaps that you're going through something, or you just need an arm around your shoulder. Even with our own network, sometimes when on coaching calls, people aren't necessarily wanting technical advice. They might be going through something at home which is overwhelming them a little bit or distracting them a little bit. Sometimes they just need to voice it. So you may not be that person. We aren't necessarily all of these support roles to everybody in our network at all times. But it's just being receptive and maybe observant to what your network needs at the time that they need it. The next I'd like to talk to you about is resource support. So these are the people in your network that provide you with kind of tangible forms of assistance, tools, processes, equipment, maybe even venues, even in my case, the story I'm about to tell you, a car. They make some sort of sacrifice for your benefit. I've got friends who have office centers who've put parts of office aside over the years. But the person I'd really like to tell you about is this chap here, Dave Beasley. So Dave Beasley runs a business in Oxfordshire, a furniture business, typically with secondhand office furniture. And they're really quite big. They've grown the business to a really good size. Dave has got a heart as large as a house. He really is a generous guy. And a few years back, on the way to present an event in the West Midlands, as I got to the M40 at Oxford, I turned onto the M40, I hit a patch of oil, and my car span and went into the side, and it was a write-off. And funny enough, another car had just done it just before me, but on the other side of the road, so I missed him too. And so I'm there now with an obligation as a speaker to get to the event to deliver my talk, with a car which is loaded with exhibition equipment and in no fit state to drive. And, obviously there's a deadline. So I thought about my support network locally. And David had been a massive supporter in other ways. He'd lent his building for networking events and all sorts of other things in the past. So I gave Dave a quick call. He was with me in 20 minutes with his spare car, which he then left me with for 3 months. And just having somebody that was there. And in fact, while I was dealing with the road authorities for what had happened, he was unloading the exhibition equipment from my car into his car. And then his wife came and picked him up so that he could drive away from the scene. And for me, that absolutely bowled me over, that some people are just willing to give you that support if they buy into your values and they really understand who it is you are. So it was a really moving moment for me, actually. Next, collaboration. So what is collaboration? Collaboration are the people in your network who are connected or who are at least showing an interest in where you're at and what you need right now. And again, I'm very blessed. My network has always provided, and in fact, not just for me, but other people in my network. I really am privileged to see that people do think once you've established trust with people, they are more than happy to start introducing you to their prize contacts. So the story I often tell around collaboration support, though, is the one of Mr. Knight, who's on the screen. I've been telling this story a lot recently, because quite often people can be in your network for quite a period of time before you realize actually that you have the meeting of minds that you do. Warren and I had shared stages and passed in the corridors of events for at least a decade. And it was actually just before the first lockdown in January 2020 when I was at an event industry expo in London. And I either tweeted or put on Facebook, I'm at Confex, is anybody here? Does anybody fancy having a coffee? And Warren had just had a cancellation. And so he was sat in Costa waiting for the meeting that cancelled. And he said, I'm here in Costa. And so I turned up for the meeting. And actually, I was the beneficiary of honey and eggs. For those of you that know, he keeps chickens and is a beekeeper. He turned up with gifts for his prior meeting. And because they didn't turn up, I left with eggs and honey on that particular day. But what we had was a lovely conversation where we shared values, understood where we were at, and understood where we could actually contribute to each other. And before you know it, a year and a half plus later, we've created something we're both very proud of and a community that we really enjoy the company of. And so collaboration comes in many shapes and forms, but just one example of where things can take you when you least expect them. Network support. So I alluded to this earlier on. Network support is the kind of connections and introductions, the things that come from you too. And the story I'd like to share on this particular one, some of you may know this particular gentleman, Andy Lapata. Now, Andy is a speaker in the networking world anyway. He's published multiple books. But many years ago, when Andy was the managing director of a network in the UK called BRE, which became BRX, which was a breakfast group kind of like BNI. Andy and I had started networking with each other, got to know each other a little bit. And one day out of the blue, he just picked up the phone and said, Warren, you should meet our regional guy in the West Midlands. He needs a speaker for an event, but you should go meet him anyway. He's very enthusiastic networker. So I took his advice. He's retired. I couldn't find his photo on LinkedIn, so I'm not sharing him. But Andy introduced me to Stuart. One night, randomly, Stuart picked up the phone to me and said, Warren, I need you to meet this chap, Bill Morrow. And he said, he's right here with me now, and just thrust his phone into Bill Morrow's face. And so before you know it, I'm having a conversation with a complete stranger, hadn't been pre-organized. And Bill was the founder of Angel's Den, which was a digital investment platform, and helping lots and lots of people find funding, but helping independent investors also find opportunities to invest. That was the platform. And Bill and I, we met in London. We really hit it off. In fact, what was meant to be a late afternoon coffee turned into about 2 o'clock in the morning, having a drink or two, but we really hit it off. And it was only about a week or so later when he said, listen, I come to Brighton, come and meet me in Brighton. I'd really love you to meet a particular chap. This chap was Dave Sumner-Smith. Now, at the time, Dave Sumner-Smith was the program director for the Telegraph Business Club. And not only did we become a partner of the Telegraph Business Club as a result of that introduction, they introduced us to all of their sponsors. So as a national business network, we ended up doing business with all of their sponsors, hundreds of thousands of pounds worth of business. And the point I'm making here is that I was able to track all of the different stages, all of the different introductions that led ultimately to a really good amount of clients. So thinking a little bit more strategically, but also coming with a generosity with your network, if you're assured that you have the values, how you support each other from there. Feedback support. So feedback are those people who are prepared to tell you how it is, and maybe prepared to show you what you're missing. My quick example for this is Rob Brown. I was speaking at an event in the times when I was a little bit more casual on stage, and it was a kind of corporate event. And speakers often will give each other on the side quiet feedback, maybe things they've noticed, etc. And I'm always keen for it, but I'm always opinionated too. And Rob said, the one thing, your talk was excellent, really enjoyed your stagecraft, etc., etc. I just don't understand the way you're dressed, was what he said. And I was there in a casual pair of shoes, pair of jeans, t-shirt, and a jacket. He said, most of the work that I suspect you're appropriate for is corporate work, and you just don't seem to be dressed for a corporate audience. And in my head, I was trying to mimic the likes of, the Apple or the tech entrepreneurs who turn up a little bit more casual. But he did make me think. And sure enough, when I started to smarten my image, I started to pick up bigger gigs for bigger companies. So that feedback was essential. And so I'm going to move us on to the discussion part of today now. And the real point I wanted to make is your network serves lots and lots of purposes. I would ask you, what type of resource are you for your network? Where do you excel? Where do you come together with them in order to provide that necessary support? And what strategies do you have for finding the right people to become part of your network too?